Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi and welcome back to That Trippi Show with Alex Ashlow. This week, why Democrats seem to have cracked the code on how to attack Trump by why we shouldn't be surprised. We zoom out and take a good look at the race nationally, why I think this is still trending in the right direction. And yes, we'll talk about RFK and that Arlington debacle, but also at some point I want to talk about SaysUs, a new social networking platform that you and I have been working on, and we're getting prepared to launch. I want to tell people about it, get your help. So, Alex, where should we get started?
Well, let's get into SaysUs, Joe. I know we've been working on it for months with a pretty amazing team, and I think a lot of folks listening to this should be pretty excited about it. Why don't you give us the latest?
So we've been building a new social network to basically take on what's happened to X and others, where the algorithms and the, castle built where, one guy makes all the decisions and we're all held hostage to his whims, and an algorithm that promotes division and hatred and anonymous attacks. And so we're getting ready now in the next week or two to launch Says.us. That's SEZ.us, SaysUs. And I think I'd love for you guys to go check out our Declaration of Independence page that's up right now. I want to paraphrase a couple of things. The history of the present social media giants is a history of the establishment of an absolute tyranny over users and their personal data, which has been manipulated to promote division and is eroding the social fabric required to strengthen democracy and community. So what we are saying at SaysUs is that democracy demands community and authentic conversation, and we commit to a future where social media empowers users, fosters genuine connections, and upholds the highest standards of reputation and trust. And so this is a platform that is going to diminish anonymous attacks, will not be amplified, and where, a real conversation can take place. And I went out and Alex helped, and we raised the money to build the app. Friends and family. Alex put in a bunch of his own money. I put in a bunch of mine, and a few others did as well. And we've now built the app. We're going to launch it soon. I hope you'll all look for it. But also, we're now faced that we have to go raise $2 million to foster the community, to build it, to actually get the critical mass required to create a new revolution, a new Declaration of Independence in social media. And so this is not a request for anybody to chip in, but if you know somebody who might be interested in an investment that will not just be an investment for profit to build the next big social network, but also an investment in the future of our democracy and community, we're looking for that kind of help and appreciate it. And thanks, Alex, for getting there first.
Look, we talk about it a lot, about rebuilding the town square, rebuilding a community that people can actually be excited about being a part of anymore. I mean, we keep going back to like the early days of what Twitter used to be, where like the replies used to be like actually like a conversation, right? And not just a total cesspool. But it's that idea that there's like real conversations, real people again, that has me excited.
It's a real town square where if you have a good reputation that you build in the town square, people are going to hear from you. The app will amplify what you have to say. And if you develop a bad reputation in the community, and the community is what's rating you and giving you that reputation that you've decided to, through attacks and in other ways, to diminish your reputation, you're diminished until you have zero reach and will never be amplified on SaysUs. So it's look, I hope you'll look out for it. I hope you'll go check out the landing page right now, SEZ.us. But Alex, let's get on with the rest of the things that we really need to talk about for folks.
Yeah, so let's get into what's going on. And a lot of this is coming. David Korn had a really good piece this week that I encourage everyone to read. We'll link to it in the show notes. And we talked about this around the DNC, Joe, but it's pretty clear that the tone really from both campaigns has just completely shifted. And one thing a lot of people have been writing in about, a lot of our listeners have noticed, is how different Democrats are in terms of their tone towards Trump. And we got a lot of questions basically like, so have they finally cracked the code in terms of how to go at him? Joe, what do you think?
I don't know what that means. Crack the code. Sorry, I don't get it. Maybe you can explain it to me. But look, you know, from the beginning, the contrast has always been there.
Right. Even and Joe Biden did it in 2020. Like it was open.
Yeah, that contrast has been there. It's what served us to win in 2020, just barely, but Biden did invoke it enough, and enough people came over. And then in 2022, despite massive inflation, gas prices, all that stuff, the caravans coming over the border, everything that should have signified a huge red wave, again, fell flat. There was none. And again, it was the contrast. And I think, if anything, that contrast has become more clear, maybe along with Kamala Harris's age difference, her stylistic difference, obviously, from Biden's. But I just think it's clear now that, I mean, again, that contrast where Trump was trying to make, Biden the old tired guy, and now he's the old tired guy. And, again, so I'm not sure there was a code to be cracked. I still think, I've always believed, and we've talked about it endlessly on the podcast, that this is going to be a 46-53 kind of race. Now, I do think there are several things about Kamala Harris in presenting a completely different profile in terms of, Biden was obviously this very experienced, been around forever, been there, done that, knows it was all experience, wisdom. And the contrast with Trump, calm, civil versus, vulgar anger and division. But it worked. But with Harris, it's a completely different profile that I think makes the contrast even starker. You've got the prosecutor versus the felon. She's really sharp and has the ability to prosecute the case like few others in the party can right now. And when you think about her, her DNC speech at the convention, in many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man, but the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. And as David Korn put it in Mother Jones, that is, he is a clown, but one who could do real damage. And I think that's, she's able to make that case. I'm still waiting. There's a line that you and I've talked about. I'm still waiting for her to say that she'll prosecute Donald Trump, the case against Donald Trump, and for America's future. And you, the American people, will be on November 5th, will be the jury. Because I think that lays out that stark contrast. Not just, it lays out the prosecutor, criminal, and empowers everybody out there, the entirety of whether you're Republican, Independent, Democrat, that you are empowered, that we are the jury, that we will decide the case that she's prosecuting against him and for our future. But she's doing that. She doesn't quite say it that way, but I think she's making it very, very clear. And maybe my way's a little too harsh, but I think it's all working to our advantage right now.
The other thing about 2024, Joe, that I think we've seen it, and I know we do this work every day at the Lincoln Project, but Trump is different than he has been. His decline is pretty noticeable, but he's really been doubling down. It's less about a populist message and more about an angry one, I think. I mean,
older, angrier, convicted felon, indicted again this week, has a very clear policy agenda with Project 2025. Yeah, that he's also very clearly realizes that we shouldn't talk about that. And he didn't know what it was, but that's bullshit. And we all know it. You also got to remember that Republicans made this about cognitive ability and how they stuck with an old weird guy and a VP pick who's incapable of connecting with voters because, it's just sort of like, okay, but we can beat the older guy in what they were projecting as cognitive peril. And that's completely turned around on them. I mean, completely. And it's actually sort of exacerbated now by, like you said, Trump doubling down. He's not the same, he's clearly lost a few steps and is sinking cognitively, and it's becoming obvious to people. But, Adam Kinzinger at the DNC said, I think really put it pretty succinctly. Quote, Trump is a weak man pretending to be strong. He's a small man pretending to be big. He's a faithless man pretending to be righteous. He's a perpetrator who can't stop playing the victim. He puts on quite a show, but there's no real strength there, which I think is the other thing that's happened. He was able to project strength in terms of making Biden the weaker, his slow walk, et cetera, by projecting that Biden was weaker. He is having a really difficult time because he now it's becoming clear, as Kinzinger said, that he is a weak man pretending to be strong. He cannot match Harris Walz in terms of just look at the energy on the trail. I mean, where the hell is he? He's sending Vance around because he's not traveling anywhere. He's going to a couple fundraisers here and there, or some safe states. Nowhere near the energy and ability that Harris and Governor Walz are projecting.
And we've learned this all around the world, really. And this is why some of the work we do with Lincoln is so important and others too. But when you've got a pretend strong man, so to speak, the thing that gets under their skin the most is calling them out about it. We've talked about this before, using humor, making fun of them.
Well, I mean, the thing that gets under his skin the most is Lincoln Project. That's like, we don't need to sugarcoat that. The one thing right. That does it every time, and he can't help but to lash out. It's just who he is, and it does get under his skin, and that's incredibly effective. It is, as you said, it's how you deal with autocrats all over the world. And the campaign, Kamala's campaign, has gotten really good at this themselves. They have Trump talking about the debates, and then they just cut in all these chicken noises. That's got to get under his skin. That's what he's lashing out about. And he keeps taking the bait, and they've gotten very, very good. I mean, the Lincoln Project was there first. But the campaign has started to you could see it, how they've, their social media, even her quips have gotten, really good at just rattling around inside Donald Trump's head, which frankly is not a good place to be inside his head, but to rattle stuff around in there, that's pretty effective. And I think, you can see it. He's his team is clearly he's not happy with his team because he can't blame himself. So it's got to be someone else to blame. He can't be happy with J.D. Vance. Again, someone else is to blame. And anytime something gets under his skin, he tends to lash out at those around him, which again is disruptive for his campaign.
Who, by the way, they're actually having to buy. And this happened in 2020, and I thought it was so funny. But like, to get his attention or prove to him that they were doing things, they would literally buy like West Palm Media Market when he was like not just the Lincoln Project, but Trump's own campaign would do it so that he would feel like they were doing something.
That's another trick from the Lincoln Project where we, would put stuff only up in that market. It would drive him crazy. He'd lash out and do something, fire people or whatever. And now his own team has taken to use that tactic to try to influence him. So it's kind of crazy. I mean, the only thing it reminds me of is, when we were in the doing working against the dictator Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, and came up with the idea of posting a website called the Secret Diary of Robert Mugabe, where we would literally post, things that we imagined him saying around around the palace as a secret diary of confession. And he actually started to respond to the damn thing. And I mean, where he just became completely unnerved because I don't know if anybody else was reading the private diary of Robert Mugabe, but Robert Mugabe was. And it really rattled him. We ended up winning that election, and the international community didn't back it up. But that's a different story. But I do think there is something when you have these sort of like narcissistic guys that view themselves as strong men. It's amazing how weak they are and how easy it is to get under their skin and how disruptive that can be to their cause.
So, Joe, looking ahead to September 10th, that's when the first debate is, and probably the only debate. I know they said they're going to have two, but realistically, I could see this only happening one if he even does show up. Given what we've talked about, what is Kamala Harris's best move?
At the debate, look, I don't know what the hell happened in the Biden debate prep, but it was disastrously wrongheaded and probably malpractice. And I'm not, I don't know who was in it or who did what, and it may have been him wanting to cram every fact into his head, and wanting to be briefed that way. But that's the wrong way for debate prep, particularly against Donald Trump. I mean, there's basically three very predictable things that He's going to come after you on immigration. What is your big swing punch right smack in his face response to that? That's it. Just get that down and do it. He's going to do the crime stuff. We know crime's gone down, but don't get into the nitty gritty facts about crime coming down. What is the big wallop right smack in his nose that you're going to hit him with when he brings up crime? And when he brings up inflation and jobs, same thing. Those three things, just three prepped responses when he says crime, immigration, jobs, inflation, those three things. And then everything else that comes up, no matter what it is, you just turn to him and say, there you go, telling another big lie. Everything else he says is a lie. By the way, anything he says on those three things is probably going to be a lie, but they're coming. So prepare for those three. Come back with a huge wallop on all three. And the rest of it is liar, liar, liar. Now, the advantage that Harris has is she is a prosecutor. She knows how to make her case. And so I think Trump is going to be at a disadvantage in this debate. I think he's going to come in there and do the, just think he's going to be able to do what he did to Joe Biden. And that's the difference between, I think, a decent Joe Biden, who I think spent a lot of the first few years of his administration thinking that he could reach out to the other side, trying to heal the nation, and doesn't want to engage in that stuff, and was completely dumbfounded that no one was saying anything other than letting the lies just roll out there in that debate. But I don't think Harris is that. She's a prosecutor. She knows who has to make the case and who has to prosecute the case. And that's why I'm saying I really would go into that believing that this debate is about me prosecuting the case against Donald Trump and for your future, the American people. And on November 5th, you will be the jury. And that's how I'm going to go into this debate, and that's how I'm going to talk to you. And you must decide who's a liar, who's a felon, all these things, but you're the jury, and I'm going to make the case, not just against him, but for the, but for your future.
I thought it was funny when you said he's going to do the crimes thing. I thought you were just going to say he's going to do more crimes, which, he probably will. The one thing I'd add, Joe, and I think this was a trap that I don't know if it was Joe Biden's team, but they have a lot of faith in institutions, like having faith in the media to fact check him. If I'm going in there, I am not expecting anybody to fact check him. Like, she's got to do it. She's got to call him out. Like you said, call it out as a lie, because the coverage after is not going to be, here are the 27 lies that were told. Right.
Right. But what my point is to not like try to load up on every single fact so that you can fact check him. It's really kind of simple. What are the facts and point you want to make against him, the strongest on immigration? What's the fact and points and easy to remember comeback on crime? What's the facts, point, and easy to remember comeback on inflation or the economy? And on everything else, if you got a fact to fact check him, fine. But remember, he is going to lie profusely. And it's more important to point out that there he is lying again, misleading you. Now, if you have a fact to point that out and make it clear, great. But don't try to like be there at the ready on every single lie with a fact. Just point out that it's a lie. And that, NATO, Ukraine, that's my point. There's plenty of things that you don't need, you don't need to prepare for anything other than you've sided with Putin. You want to end NATO's support of Ukraine, and et cetera. You don't need to load up on those facts. You know them. And so there's like three places that you need to fight on. Yeah, maybe Afghanistan, maybe he's going to come with that. Okay, fine. What is your strongest response? There are like only 3 or 4 things that she needs to be able, and they're all predictable. That's my point. That's what was so weird about the Biden debate. You did not need to be a rocket scientist. You did not need to be a top operative in the White House to know the 3 things that Donald Trump was going to come at you with. And so it shouldn't be, you don't want to give the president or Kamala Harris the Encyclopedia Britannica on crime statistics. It's what the hell is your most memorable, hardest punch to a liar who's going to tell them that crime has gone up dramatically when it's gone down. The same on immigration, the same on inflation and the economy. And if you have those 3, which tend to be the biggest issues that are out there for a lot of people, and you also are armed with abortion bans, the freedom of women to make their own decisions, et cetera, that she doesn't need to be prepped on. She knows it chapter and verse. Then the only other things that can come up are essentially Trump lying again, Mexico didn't pay for the wall, that kind of stuff. And it should be pretty easy to do. And by the way, I think most Americans would find it very believable that he's lying again. Even the ones who think when he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue, he must have had a good reason, and therefore they'd believe that lie too if he did it. So I'm not, do not worry about those things. Just call him out. And on the 3 or 4 things that he's going to come at you with, have your response, know it. And, it's like, in the debate with Dick Gephardt, the one that propelled him into first place, Paul Simon was in first place, the senator from Illinois and Iowa. He was in first place in the polls, and Dick Gephardt went into that debate armed with basically Reaganomics was what Reagan was pushing in that year and had been pushing, and it was anathema in the Democratic Party. And Dick Gephardt turned to him and said, Reaganomics is Simonomics with a bow tie. Simon wore a bow tie. And it was a devastating attack. And that's all, that's what I'm saying. What is that? What is the response? He was prepared for when Reaganomics and the economy came up to turn to Paul Simon and hit him hard. And he did. There are lots of moments like that in debates, and my experience in prepping people, and I was part of that prep with Paul Begala and Donna Brazil back in our many younger days. But my experience on debate prep is to not load the candidate up with facts, load them up and have them thinking about, in these mock debates, this very memorable moment. Create the memorable moment. And if you know your opponent's going to come to you on 2 or 3 or 4 things, what is the memorable moment you want to create? Reagan, it was, I paid for that microphone. It knocked George Bush out of the race in New Hampshire. The best prep has been creating that moment, knowing it's coming. You know it's coming. You know he's going to call you out on crime. What's the memorable moment? So now it's like a big softball. Like it looks as big as a volleyball as it's coming across the plate. And you know it was coming, and you knew exactly what your response is going to be to create the memorable moment. There will be 3 or 4 of those in this debate. And that's what I would prepare her for, or have her think about. Some of them, it's not cooking up the line. Some of these things happen in debate prep. Once you sort of like walk them through, this is what you want to do, they'll often come in to the debate prep, and suddenly there's a moment that they, now that they're prepared to come in that way instead of fact, they often come up with something that's their own words, and that immediately everybody in the room, everybody in debate prep says, yeah, when he comes, that's what you do. That was, and that reinforcement, that kind of a mock debate can really make a difference. And that's what I think they did not do in the Biden debate prep. Couldn't possibly have done that. Otherwise, he, I don't know that he would have done a whole lot better. I don't know, he whether what his health was like that night, et cetera. But I do know that he came in there clearly loaded with a bunch of facts, that he had trouble. And that's the other, I don't care how old you are, you go into a debate with a ton of facts in your head, and then you get asked a question, and you're now trying to figure out in 30 seconds which of those facts to put in the 30-second answer, and it all gets jumbled up. That's not new to Joe Biden. That's what happens when you do prep that way. And there's plenty of examples of people who've lost debates because that's the way their prep went.
Joe, I know we want to get into polls, but let's do a deeper dive in that next week, and we can zoom out a little bit. I should mention, yes, the Trump campaign is imploding again this week. We'll cover the effects of that next week, but nothing you wouldn't expect. Although they did get into a bit of a fight at Arlington National Cemetery, which I did not have on my bingo card, but I've learned that the bingo card needs to always expand. So Joe, take us home.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone for listening to that Trippi Show. Please check out SaysUs, SEZ.us. We'll put a link to it in our show notes. I'd really appreciate you giving us some feedback on what you think. And again, if there's anybody out there who may have think of someone who might be interested in helping us raise the money now that we're ready to launch into the next round, that would be great. Or just joining us and helping and supporting SaysUs would be incredible. If all of you could start checking out, letting us know what works, what doesn't work once we launch, would be great. This podcast will be free with support from our advertisers and is part of Resolute Square. Check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to that Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question in a review on iTunes. Things are looking good. We got to keep doing the work, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Resolute Square.